Okay, this is the audio review for Looking Glass Self by Charles Horton Cooley. Okay, so in the beginning of the reading, he starts out by saying that there's no sense of I without its correlative sense of you or he or they. Another quote from that same part is, "Each to each a looking glass reflects the other that doth pass." So if you're looking in the mirror at your appearance, you're either pleased or not, right, with what you see. So, extending this to the kind of mirrors he's talking about in a social sense is to say that in our imaginations, we perceive someone else's mind and we think of how they might see us, right? So, we think of our appearance, our character, so on, and this affects us in a lot of different ways. So, first, there's these three elements that Cooley says are part of this imagining of others in our, self-conscious reactions to what we imagine them to feel about us. So, three elements. The first one is that we just imagine our appearance to the other person, right? We kind of, again, make ourselves an object and think of ourselves in that context. And then the second part is that we have an imagination not just of how they see us, but of their judgment of what they see, right? So their judgment of that appearance. And the third is just some sort of feeling that we get in response to that judgment. So it could be a positive thing like pride, or it could be a negative feeling like shame or mortification. So imagine judgment is really essential. This moves us to either feel pride or shame. And this is what he calls the inputted sentiment, right? Or the imagined effect that our reflection has on another person's mind. So it's not like every person's the same in the way that it affects us as far as imagined judgment. Like we don't have, not any person on the street do we care about their judgment. The character of the person and the weight of their opinion is really what matters or makes a difference in how we feel or how we relate to what we think their judgment of us is. So, for example, we want smart people to see us as smart. We want brave people to see us as brave, right? Meaning it reflects the character of the person. And of course, you're going to have a different weight of different people's opinions. Like some random person on the street, if they react to you negatively, you're like, who cares, right? But if your significant others, meaning the people that socialized you or your parents, your peers, your friends, the people that are the closest to you, you're going to care a lot more about what they think, right? So the weight of their opinion is greater. So we imagine what people think of us and we start sharing their judgments of us. And again, these aren't necessarily their judgments, they're our interpretation of those judgments, right? So this is something that develops from a young age. So children are really adept at studying the movements of the people around them. And they start to see a connection pretty early between their actions and the movements of those around them, right? And they realize they can change those movements. So they really just begin to perceive their own influence over power or, basically their use of power over people. So, little kids love exercising social power. So, like I have a little niece that she knows that her mom reacts whenever she makes a squeal or a scream. So she just screams bloody murder, right? And it's really interesting to watch. Like she lives with my parents right now, which is like a whole other thing. But I was over there hanging out with my parents and they were babysitting little Ruby. And she was chill. And then once my cousin got home, she started screaming bloody murder. And it was largely because she gets the emotional reaction out of her that she wants. So that's, she basically the idea that little kids learn how to push your buttons, right? They know how to kind of manipulate you in a certain way. So another example would be my little nephew on, my boyfriend's brother's kid. Oh man, he's so adorable, but he's also coercive in his use of power. So for example, if he wants you to do something, it's really adorable, but it's still coercive. He'll walk up to you and grab your hand and just start walking you towards something, right? Like he wanted to go outside and see the dogs. So he walks up to his grandma and just grabs her by the hand, starts pulling her that way. Right? Meaning he knows he has power in that way. Actually, the most adorable thing he does now, it's really adorable. Basically, my boyfriend's sister-in-law is really trying to work with Logan about this. Because apparently right now, whenever he needs anything of any kind, he'll say help. Not quite help, but like help with an A, almost like help. And so she's trying to get him to say things like, water, please. And so she'll repeat, water, please, and model for him in the kind of linguistic way that we learn. And he'll say, help, help. Like he needs his shoe tied, he'll be like, shoe help. Or like whatever it is, it's just help. So again, kids really learn how to push your buttons, how to manipulate people into their own gain. And they really learn to be different things to different people. Right? So that what works on, one of your parents might not work on the other, right? Or what works on your grandparents isn't necessarily what works on your parents, those kind of things. So as a small child, we try to get attention. And of course, we cry if we feel indifference or disapproval. So if kids do something that make adults laugh, they tend to do it again, right? And this is kind of how we develop this rudimentary social self. And this germ of personal ambition, as he calls it. So, imagination and cooperation that we have with these kind of feelings inside of us create this social I, but becomes an object of interest and a goal for these kids, right? Meaning they start to develop, an ambition of getting attention, being acknowledged, having people see them in a positive way. And so he talks about this idea of progressing in this way, or progress. How when we age, we develop greater definiteness is kind of the way he calls it. And again, I know the whole reading is somewhat verbose, but he just means like fullness or inwardness of how we imagine other people's states of mind. So when you're a little kid, you don't necessarily put yourself in someone else's shoes very in depth. As you get older, especially as you grow up, you want to see yourself, or you want people to see you positively. So you're going to develop a bit more of an understanding of other people's perspectives as a result of your lived experience. And so it's interesting that when you become an adult, you kind of mesh these things together. Instead of it being a specific process of, a reflection, it's more of happening concurrently. So adults imagine thought and expression at once. So meaning we don't separate what other people think from the visible expression of that thought. We imagine it all at once. So, like we don't kind of in a long-term way, like break down those steps and seeing ourselves reflected in someone else's, internal sense of us. But again, this is something that kind of comes from a almost knee-jerk or automatic reaction. As we age, we start to become more adept to people's reactions, like what their facial expression looks like, or what their body language looks like, or things like that really show us a visible expression of what they're thinking. So we don't think of it as, they think it and then they produce a image to us. We think of it as happening at the same moment, right? They make a sour face when they see us, and you're like, oh, I guess that person doesn't like me, right? That it becomes almost an automatic reaction that happens so many times throughout our days, right? And it really does shape our sense of self. As the people that are close to us, if they have those negative reactions, we then develop negative feelings about ourselves as a response to seeing ourselves the way that we perceive others to see us.